If you were to pose the question regarding who ultimately ended the Wars of the Roses, many individuals would quickly respond with the name of King Henry VII. He is often celebrated for his decisive victory at the Battle of Bosworth. However, this significant achievement, which marked the culmination of a long and bloody conflict, was not solely the result of Henry's efforts. A crucial figure alongside him was his wife, Elizabeth of York, whose role was not merely supportive, but fundamentally central to the establishment of the Tudor dynasty and the restoration of stability in England. Elizabeth of York was born on February 11, 1466, as the first daughter of King Edward IV, a member of the House of York, who had claimed the throne through a combination of rightful inheritance, military prowess, and strategic victories in battles. Her mother, Elizabeth Woodville, came from a minor noble background, which often led to her being looked down upon by the higher lords at court, despite her noble heritage through her own mother. However, Elizabeth Woodville's marriage to Edward IV secured a place for her family among England's elite. From her birth, Princess Elizabeth symbolized the fragile hope for peace in a kingdom ravaged by decades of civil war. And while many within the realm desired the birth of a male heir, her arrival was still celebrated with grandeur. Her christening at Westminster Abbey was a magnificent event, attended by notable figures including her two grandmothers, Jacquetta of Luxembourg and Cecily Neville, along with her cousin Richard Neville, the powerful Earl of Warwick, famously known as the Kingmaker. To commemorate the occasion, Edward IV gifted his queen a jewel valued at £125, equivalent to approximately £65,000 today. This extravagant display reflected a prosperous nation under Edward's reign, where England's economy thrived, primarily through the export of tin and wool, while importing very little except wine. As a daughter of a medieval royal family, Elizabeth's childhood was marked by constant relocation among various royal residences in and around London. She grew accustomed to the city and the court life that would shape her destiny. The real challenges that would shape Elizabeth's future were not those fought on the battlefield, but rather the power struggles that took place within the court. Edward IV's cousin and longtime ally, the Earl of Warwick, expected to hold sway as the king's favorite advisor. Yet Queen Elizabeth Woodville proved herself to be a capable and politically astute consort, earning her husband's love and trust despite his numerous infidelities. With Edward's backing, the Woodville family secured influential positions at court, leading to fierce rivalries with other powerful factions, particularly with Warwick. Elizabeth enjoyed a life of privilege, being the eldest of 10 children. When her sister Mary was born in 1467, her father conferred upon Elizabeth the manor of Great Linford in Buckinghamshire for her lifetime, which, although later lost, provided financial support for her household. Like many royal children of her time, Elizabeth was raised away from her parents, residing in a nursery household at Sheen Palace in Surrey. This separation, while routine in royal practice, was intended both to showcase the wealth of the crown and to shield the children from the plagues that frequently besieged London. Her childhood meals included bread, ale, meat, fish, and butter, accompanied by readings of moral tales, reinforcing the values expected of her future role. Elizabeth's household was staffed with pages, servants, and attendants, establishing her status as a young royal. While educational opportunities for girls of her time focused primarily on morality and obedience, Edward IV took a progressive stance by encouraging Elizabeth's intellectual development. As a collector of manuscripts himself, he ensured that she was literate in English and had some understanding of French. In addition to her studies, Elizabeth was trained in music, dancing, horse riding, and needlework. Nevertheless, the reality of royal life dictated that Elizabeth's ultimate purpose would center on marriage. In the 15th century, daughters were often regarded as pawns in the political games of powerful families, married off to strengthen alliances and secure dynastic power rather than for love. Elizabeth's first engagement was arranged in 1470, when her father confronted rebellion from Warwick and his brother George, the Duke of Clarence. To placate Warwick, Edward betrothed Elizabeth to Warwick's young nephew, George Neville, elevating him to the title of Duke of Bedford. However, this arrangement was more an act of political desperation than a well-considered match, and soon fell apart when Edward was forced into exile later that year. During Edward IV's exile, Elizabeth, her mother, and her siblings found sanctuary at Westminster Abbey, where Elizabeth gave birth to her younger brother Edward, who would later be known as Edward V, when Edward IV returned successfully in 1471. Elizabeth's life at court resumed. By 1475, her hand was promised once more, this time to Charles, the French Dauphin. However, the engagement was broken off by 1482 as political circumstances shifted yet again. Throughout these formative years, Elizabeth became acutely aware of the volatility of royal life. She witnessed her father's infidelities and her mother's tacit acceptance while grappling with the fragility of alliances built on marriage. Yet, when her own marriage was arranged, Elizabeth exhibited unwavering loyalty, an honorable distinction from her father's behavior. Tragedy struck in April 1483, when Edward IV died unexpectedly at just 40 years old, leaving Elizabeth, now 17, and their son Edward, who became Edward V at the age of 12, with their uncle Richard, Duke of Gloucester, appointed as protector. The Woodville family felt a looming threat. Aware that their influence might wane under Richard's control, Elizabeth's uncle Anthony Woodville and her half-brother Thomas Grey rushed to move young Edward to London. However, Richard intercepted them, seizing the young king and later executing both Anthony and Thomas on charges of treason, fearing for their safety. Elizabeth Woodville once again sought refuge in Westminster Abbey with her daughters and younger son, Richard of Shrewsbury. They remained in a state of fear and uncertainty. What transpired next is one of history's lingering mysteries. Edward V and Richard of Shrewsbury were held in the Tower of London, ostensibly awaiting their coronation. Instead, they were declared illegitimate, and Richard III seized the throne, effectively erasing their claims. The two boys disappeared from history, and while most assume they were murdered, other rumors suggest they may have escaped. For Princess Elizabeth, the situation must have been harrowing. With her father gone, her brothers vanished, and her family branded illegitimate, she faced profound trauma. Accounts from the time depict her mother in hysterical grief, unable to comprehend the betrayal of Richard. Elizabeth, too, felt the weight of vulnerability, being part of a despised faction. Life in sanctuary was bleak. Resources were scarce, merchants jacked up prices, and the family relied heavily on charity. Amid the despair, a secret alliance began to form between Elizabeth Woodville and Margaret Beaufort, the formidable mother of Henry Tudor. Through a shared physician, the two women negotiated an agreement whereby Margaret would supply funds and resources, while Elizabeth promised her support in return for a marriage between Henry and her daughter Elizabeth of York. This audacious plan sought to unite the warring houses of Lancaster and York. Henry, in exile in Brittany and France, lacked titles and lands, but his weak claim to the throne could be bolstered through a marriage alliance. The idea garnered significant momentum, as many disillusioned Yorkists rallied behind Henry's cause, seeing Elizabeth as the rightful heir. In December 1483, Henry boldly declared at Rennes Cathedral that he would wed Elizabeth upon becoming king, thereby solidifying his support. In an effort to counter this developing threat, Richard III invited Elizabeth Woodville and her daughters back to court, promising their safety and appropriate marriages. After much persuasion, Elizabeth and her sisters returned to court. However, it soon circulated that Richard, whose own wife Anne Neville was gravely ill, intended to marry his niece Elizabeth himself, which created scandal and forced Richard to officially deny the rumors. By 1485, the political landscape shifted dramatically when Henry Tudor landed in Wales and marched toward Bosworth, where, with the crucial backing of Thomas Stanley, he defeated and killed Richard III, finally claiming the English crown. Elizabeth of York, the long, precarious years of uncertainty had come to an end. Henry sent for her immediately, ensuring her safety and reuniting her with her mother in London. Elizabeth was soon set to become the queen who would unite the estranged houses of York and Lancaster. Although Henry VII promised to marry Elizabeth of York, he did not rush to the altar. First, he sought to solidify his claim to the throne within Parliament, asserting his right to rule through both conquest and his tenuous Beaufort lineage. Only after establishing his legitimacy in his own right would he reinforce that claim by marrying Elizabeth. Furthermore, Henry needed to annul Richard III's pronouncement of Edward IV's children as illegitimate, as Elizabeth could not legally be his queen without overturning that declaration. In taking these steps, Henry acknowledged the grim reality that Edward V and Richard of Shrewsbury were likely dead, their claims extinguished forever. Before a papal dispensation arrived from Rome, the marriage of Henry and Elizabeth was arranged. Despite their familial connection through John of Gaunt and Edmund of Langley, official approval was necessary. In January 1486, a local dispensation was secured, paving the way for their long-anticipated wedding, which took place on January 18th at Westminster Abbey. The occasion was lavish and deliberately designed to symbolize the unification of York and Lancaster. Elizabeth donned sumptuous fabrics, including silk damask, crimson satin, gold-adorned cloth, showcasing her legitimacy as the daughter of Edward IV and her new role as the rightful queen consort. Throughout the country, the people celebrated this momentous union, lighting bonfires, composing poems, singing songs, and hosting feasts in honor of not just the marriage of two individuals, but the healing of a fractured nation. For Elizabeth, life underwent a dramatic transformation as she became queen consort. Her new responsibilities included embodying virtue, humility, and generosity, while supporting Henry as king and producing heirs for their dynasty. Nevertheless, within these constraints lay opportunities for influence. As queens wielded power through patronage, charitable works, and their close ties with the monarch, Elizabeth understood this dynamic well. Her personal motto, humble and reverent, illustrated her acceptance of her role. While her emblem of the White Rose of York boldly asserted her heritage, she was more than just Henry's wife. She was a living emblem of the unification of York and Lancaster. Elizabeth wasted no time in fulfilling her royal duties, becoming pregnant just months after their wedding. By September 1486, she was sent to Winchester, a location steeped in the legendary lore of King Arthur. Henry, keen on associating his new dynasty with ancient myths, decreed that their child would be born in this Camelot. Giving birth during the 15th century came with its own set of dangers. Despite some surprisingly advanced practices, much depended on luck and divine intervention. Childbirth was so perilous that many marriages endured only a few years. On September 20th, 1486, Elizabeth delivered a son named Arthur, who, although born a month premature, was strong and healthy. His name represented Henry's vision for the resurgence of a Golden Age's symbol of their hope for a lasting dynasty. The birth was perceived across England as a divine endorsement of their marriage and the promise of peace. Like many royal infants, Arthur was soon assigned his own household, separate from his mother's care, as it was customary for queens not to nurse their own children due to traditional practices and for the sake of fertility. Elizabeth's role then was to ensure his household was well-staffed, with education and upbringing suitable for a future king. However, the toll of childbirth left Elizabeth with lingering health issues, including a persistent fever that lasted for months. It was only after her recovery that she resumed her duties, giving thanks to God for her son with a generous donation to the priory at Winchester. As Queen Elizabeth also played a pivotal role in shaping the royal court. Henry, having spent a significant portion of his youth in exile, was unfamiliar with the rituals and displays associated with kingship. Elizabeth and her mother-in-law, Margaret Beaufort, filled this void, establishing the opulence expected within the Tudor court. November 25, 1487, Elizabeth was crowned Queen of England at Westminster Abbey, dressed in sumptuous purple velvet and crowned with precious pearls. During the procession, eager crowds scrumptiously gathered, attempting to collect pieces of the cloth beneath her feet as souvenirs. The enthusiasm became so intense that some individuals tragically lost their lives in the crush of bodies, highlighting both her popularity and the enormous expectations attached to her role. The coronation feast was an extravagant affair, comprising over 50 dishes, a clear showcase of royal wealth. Henry and Margaret Beaufort, positioned discreetly behind a screen, watched as Elizabeth took center stage, allowing her to shine amidst the pomp and celebration. Elizabeth's daily life combined ceremonial duties with more mundane expectations of a medieval woman. She was responsible for embroidering and mending clothes, not only for herself, but for Henry as well, personally embellishing the robes for his Order of the Garter with gilded thread. She engaged skilled craftsmen and embroiderers to produce fine garments and linens, often exchanged as New Year gifts. This attention to fashion served as a potent tool for displaying power and prosperity. As the king and queen were expected to appear in the best attire at court, while Henry often garnered a reputation for being stingy, he lavishly invested in Elizabeth's wardrobe and jewels, even covering expenses for her ladies-in-waiting, who were expected to dress almost as exquisitely as the queen herself. Elizabeth maintained her passion for learning throughout her royal life. She supported the printing press established by William Caxton and funded the production of books, thereby becoming a patron of the arts while also contributing generously to charitable causes. Wherever she traveled, she distributed alms to the poor and was known for her deep piety, regularly praying and donating to saints and shrines. In November 1489, Elizabeth welcomed her second child, a daughter named Margaret after Henry's mother. Margaret's lineage would later connect her to the Scottish crown, ultimately uniting the thrones of England and Scotland. However, joy turned to concern as new threats emerged in the following years. The 1490s, a pretender named Perkin Warbeck surfaced, claiming to be Elizabeth's long-lost brother, Richard of Shrewsbury. Charming and persuasive, he garnered support from various courts in Europe, who viewed him as a means to destabilize Henry's reign. Warbeck conducted multiple failed invasions before his capture in 1497. Despite initially treating him with surprising leniency, housing him in the Tower, while allowing him appearances at court, Henry ultimately ordered Warbeck's execution in 1499 following a botched escape attempt involving the true Edward, Earl of Warwick. Elizabeth never publicly chronicled her feelings regarding Warbeck. If he bore any resemblance to her brother, she did not divulge any sign of recognition. Perhaps she understood the painful truth. Her brothers had perished years prior, and their memory was now overshadowed by the ongoing political tumult. Over the course of her life, Elizabeth gave birth to a total of 7 children. Following Arthur and Margaret were Prince Henry in 1491, who was fated to become Henry VIII along with Elizabeth, who tragically passed away in infancy. Elizabeth of York's life, marked by the intersection of personal trials and monumental historical events, not only played a crucial role in the establishment of the Tudor dynasty, but also significantly influenced the course of English history through her lineage and enduring legacy. As the rightful queen, she symbolized the hope of a reconciled nation. Subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon to support our work and never miss an upload. Like this video, drop a comment, and share it with others to show your support and help us grow this historical community.